If these are the things that Gen Z and or millennials are saying they want, can we pause and look at what they actually are and ask if that's so different as to what any individual would want from work? Because it's very easy to say they're demanding, they're needy, they're this, but if you really look at the core of what they want, they're basic human needs that we all want.
There's a generational divide in the workplace that Madeline Miller wants to change. Madeline is a career coach who focuses specifically on Gen Z and millennial clients, who she says are entering the workforce with an entirely novel set of challenges.
Madeline's clients are in their 20s and grew up in the age of climate change, sweeping tech innovations, and being educated online during a global pandemic. That all amounts to a very new kind of instability, so it's no wonder they need a unique kind of guidance at work.
In this episode, Madeline takes us through those shaky work stories, including her own, in her former life as a very successful but very unsatisfied entertainment lawyer. She shares how she helps her clients find their footing and explains why it's high time that employers respond to the needs of new generations of workers.
Welcome to The Breakout, a show about smashing through life's little boxes and forging your own path. I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich.
And I'm Kelly Gunther. Carrie and I are people and change experts, best friends, and business partners. We've spent more than 25 years helping employees and leaders change. With love and a lot of laughs, we're here to empower you to live life on your terms. Our methods may seem a bit unconventional, but trust us, they will change your life.
Let's be real for a second. We know change can sometimes be scary. Heck, it even scares us. But staying the same can be even scarier. On The Breakout, we prove that you can escape expectations. And best of all, we show you how. Thank you, Madeline. We're so excited that you're here. I'm really thrilled to talk, maybe because I also have a Generation Z child. So I'm really excited to hear about your work. So tell us what you do, and in about one or two lines, what do you help people break out of?
I was a former entertainment attorney in Hollywood. I'm originally from Australia, and I turned to career and leadership coaching a couple of years ago. I was particularly interested in working with the Gen Z and younger millennials, because I really felt that throughout my career, that had been the period I had struggled the most and really had to find my own way. And then I was doing a lot of reading about changes in, generational changes at work. So Gen Z in particular started work mainly online, perhaps finished school online. They've sort of entered the workforce in a really different way. So I already thought that those early years at work were incredibly challenging for me. And I thought, what can I do to take sort of the executive coaching world, which focuses on the most senior of leaders, and make it relevant and accessible for the people that I really think need it the most.
I love that, because you're so right. When you look back, when we ask people about their careers, they'll say, oh, I wish I would have known this in my 20s. But can you tell us or remind everyone, what is the Generation Z and what is millennials?
So I'm an old millennial, cusp of Gen X. So I know that millennials start around the 1980, 81.
Okay.
And then they'll go for 15-ish years. And then the Gen Zs are people in their sort of early 20s. So they're really like the people that are entering the workforce now. I work with Gen Z clients and they're around the 25 mark. That's why I pitch my services for Gen Z and millennials, because I'm really talking about the younger millennials. My kind of bracket is around 25 to maybe 32. That's the sweet spot. And that sort of straddles millennials and Gen Zs. But, a 32-year-old, I'm 44. A 32-year-old is very different to a 44-year-old, even though we're technically both millennials. So within the generations, there's obviously variation, but, it's an imperfect science, but that's how we kind of allocate it.
Yes. No, it isn't perfect. And I do know that Kelly and I are both Gen X, correct, Kelly? But Kelly reminds me that she's 10 years younger than me.
Yeah,
so
right.
We're still in the same.
Yeah.
And it is significant. It's
right.
like dog years sometimes. So for those, they're like, I don't do math. It's Gen X, then millennials, then Gen Z.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So those really old Gen Xers like me, and then Kelly with her bright, shining young face. But anyway, but what I love is you're helpful because those millennials and Gen Zs that you get, I mean, the brain really forms at 25 and you're getting them at this good age. So what have you seen in these generations of Gen Z and millennials that they want or need that perhaps the different generations do not?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. Obviously, it comes up a lot. So I want to make the point that every time a new generation enters the workforce, we have this conversation, right?
We sure do.
Yeah, the millennials wanted this, and what do we call the millennials? They were the participation award generation.
Yes,
all of that kind of stuff. And to an extent, yeah, it's true. Times shift and change. So I think some of it is just generally age-based. However, I think we need to look at each generation within the context of how they entered the workforce. And if we look at Gen Zs, they are entering the workforce at a very unpredictable time. Socially, things are changing a lot. Financially, I don't think we can underestimate the impact of the pandemic on their sort of outlook on life. From sort of the boomers generation, the concept of a job for life has really shifted. And that's sort of been a gradual thing that sort of started with the millennials who sort of notoriously have moved roles more. But I think that's becoming more and more prevalent. We have much higher focus on what we call the gig economy. A lot of people are turning to more small business, entrepreneurialism. But I do think that there is definitely an increasingly vocal demand for employers and companies to really meet the needs of their younger workers in ways that haven't been quite as pronounced as before.
What Kelly and I see a lot too is what we love about the Generation Z and millennials coming up is that they're demanding more from an organization than ever before. It was very passive. Like you said, it was the job for life. It was, I'll do whatever you say. I'll move 12 times. I'll uproot my family. I mean, we've heard that so many times. And people are like, that's kind of stupid. That's kind of dumb. But if we go back, Madeline, to you, because you started off, you said you were an entertainment lawyer. And Kelly and we're going to dedicate an entire podcast to lawyers who have turned into different careers.
Oh, really?
Who have had different careers. Oh, yeah. Because one of our favorites is the lawyer who became a clown. But we have had over-indexed with the number of lawyers who have a different career. You were a UN lawyer in Cambodia. You were an entertainment lawyer in Hollywood for the James Bond franchise. And so out again, especially to the outside world, once you're a lawyer, you've made it. That's what you went to school for. That's what, so bravo. And now you're done. And so why are you doing different things? Why were they not fulfilling for you?
Okay, that hits the nail on the head. Exactly. The optics are, well, you went to law school and you became a lawyer, so bravo, you're done, right? And when I was sort of working out to go to law school, that is definitely what I thought. Well, if I go to law school, I'll have a purpose and it will be sort of done for me, and then I can tell people what I do. There wasn't this, there were things I liked about the law. There were certain intellectual things I was interested in, but I didn't have this sort of burning sort of love for the law. It was really I was 26 and I needed to do something. When I got out of law school, I sort of had hoped, well, that's it, right? Now I'm a lawyer. And then it's well, where am I going to work? So I got a job in a law firm that did media law, which was pretty great in Melbourne. Within a year, I'm in Cambodia doing international criminal law. Within a year, I'm back working for the government. A year later, I've moved to corporate government. I moved within my law career at least 5 times in the first 5 years. So it didn't work. It hadn't given me that sort of strong identity I'd been looking for because I hadn't done the internal work to work out what I really wanted to do.
How is that manifesting itself? The knowing that it wasn't working?
I felt increasingly frustrated. I never felt happy. I felt that there was always a solution to be found in a new role. And then when there wasn't, I was deeply disappointed. But I didn't really stop to sort of say, well, what do you want? It really was an internal thing. And so I coped by moving, which is what I do. Create some change. And so then I, like I said, did all these different parts of law. And then I ended up saying, oh no, I really, really want to make movies. So I'm going to be an entertainment lawyer. And my dad, I remember at the time, he was like, if you want to make movies, why don't you make movies? I'm like, no, I'm going to do it by being a lawyer. And he was like, okay. So then I moved to the US. And then, look, I really did, I'm saying, I didn't like being a lawyer, but I really had some great experiences. I ended up being the production attorney for the James Bond franchise. I was in London. I was back here. I worked on the big film. It honestly was amazing. It was great. I just knew the whole time, this isn't really what I want to do. And I knew I didn't really want to do it because when people ask me, what do you do? I never wanted to be like, I'm a lawyer. Because I was like, well, that doesn't really represent who I am. And I think if you're not saying what you do for work because it doesn't feel congruent with who you want to be, there's a problem.
We'll get back to the interview after this quick break.
On The Breakout, Carrie and I celebrate big changes and small shifts. Only about 10% of us are really self-aware, but 90% of us think we are. Without self-awareness, change is tough. And if you don't know what box you're in, you can't break out of it. That's where we come in.
We are coaches and consultants that help you dig into change. We've spent our lives breaking through expectations, and we've devoted our careers to showing people how to do the same. We're here to help you demolish the story you've built around yourself to reveal the true you. Then the real fun begins.
And by fun, we mean helping you figure out your why and taking action to forge a fresh path. Connect with us at abrachigroup.com.
So how did you get to coaching then?
Well, I think along the way, the last sort of X amount of years since my 20s, I'd always had all this sort of existential angst around work. I've always been chasing something. And, I'm in my late 30s or mid 30s by now. And I was like, what am I doing? So I'd started to do a lot of that work around who do I really want to be? What really is purpose? How do I feel fulfilled? Because like I said, externally, I, had the big tick. I was successful. And I realized it had been a big theme for me in my life. So I started doing a lot of the work myself. And then I think, it was a bit of a fortuitous sort of opportunities. A friend of mine who I'd met way back, and she was doing negotiation and conflict resolution work at Stanford, and she'd left that to become a coach. And she had sort of said, look, there's a lot of work there and I think you'd be really great at it because, you think about these things in the right way and you have all this experience to share and you're quite passionate about it. And one day she said, I've got too many clients, would you like to take on this client? And I said, sure. So I coached somebody and I realized as I was doing it that this felt like the right place for me. I suddenly could talk about the stuff that I cared about. I could positively impact somebody else. And like I said, my whole life has sort of been consumed by this sense of what is my purpose? What am I doing? How do I become self-actualized? So it just sort of all fell into place that way.
I love that. You developed your own coaching formula, which, let me get it right, alignment, influence, and resilience. Can you talk about those three things and then how you use them when you coach people?
Yeah. So I sort of did a bit of that big picture brainstorming. I was like, what are sort of common threads that unite us all? And I drew on the fact that I had worked with so many different industries in so many different countries. And I thought everybody at work, and this was very much my experience, wants to feel that they're doing stuff that's of meaning to them. And it doesn't have to be they're necessarily changing the world or working, in social activism. It just needs to feel like they turn up every day and have a purpose, right? They put their time into something and it feels like it aligns with who they are and how they want to be. So I think that without alignment, the rest is sort of immaterial because I had influence and I had developed resilience, but I didn't have the alignment, so it didn't feel real or powerful. So I was like, alignment is like the foundation. Do you know who you are and what you want to do, what gets the best out of you and how you want to be showing up? And then the influence was fed by my belief and sort of observation that everybody, it's a human behavior. We all want to feel recognized for the work we do. And a lot of the clients I were getting were feeling frustrated by that. They were extremely high achieving and they were like, I'm just not getting the respect, I deserve. I'm not getting recognized. How do I get my boss to see me, And so I said, influence is a very important part of all of us at work, and how do you get influence? And some of it is on you and some of it is systemic, but I focus on, what can you control? You can't control everything and we should always be pushing for, structural changes, but what can you do? Once you've got alignment, you can really start to work on influence because it will be more authentic because you know who you are. And then the resilience is more of a sort of overarching sort of theme. Like when you have alignment, when you're building influence, you're starting to feel more authentic, congruent, confident. That's when you start being able to sort of make bold decisions, take risks, back yourself, all of these things that you do. And every time you do them, whatever happens, you develop some, resilience to know what you can do or should do next time. And so resilience, I really thought there was too much emphasis in sort of popular culture around resilience being tied to sort of grit and pain and suffering. And I think that, we do have to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, and that, growth happens from there. But I think that I was concerned, and I am still concerned, that this sort of discussion around grit and pain and suffering is used to justify toxic workplaces and toxic management.
Sure is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, like resilience is not just pain. Resilience is healthy emotional resilience where you take risks, it doesn't go the way you wanted. You can bring yourself back up, but you still stay true to yourself. So that's the formula that I like. I'm not reinventing the wheel, but I think that it's a nice way of approaching, professional and personal development.
Yeah, you're so right. To me, resilience is setting your boundaries as well. And I know that's really, really hard for people, especially when the company's telling you, oh, come on, you got to be resilient. You got to change. You have to be ambiguous.
Can you not take this on? Yeah.
Can you not take this on? Can't you? Are you not good with change? No, I'm good with change. I just would like to live longer too. Like I would like to be healthy.
Totally. My light bulb moment came probably from a pretty shared, experience a lot of us have at work, unfortunately, when I was working at this production company and I was just being piled with work. And I just kept doing more and more and more. And like I was suffering. I was like sick. I was like panicking. And I sort of thought, well, at some point they'll see how much I'm like suffering, or the work will die down and they'll just stop, or they'll put a boundary on me. But they didn't. Because the more you do, the more they're like, great, give her more, And I think that I'd say that's almost textbook burnout, how I was in that period, was when I just was like, no, this is not about me destroying myself for any organization anywhere.
I love her pillars because what Kelly and I always talk about as well is that alignment is so key. Because again, if I don't have alignment, if I have no path, then every path is right, which is not true. If I don't know what I want, then every road leads somewhere, and that's not helpful. So what culture am I gonna wanna be in? What lights me up? And making sure that this is right for me. It doesn't have to be you're a social justice warrior and you're out in the front line, you're picketing things, but it's the work that I do. I feel it that I am making a difference. And maybe I'm making a difference because I'm making sure that the financial audit is so good that the company doesn't get fined. That can be what your purpose and impact is. But companies need to help people kind of find that. But then I also need to be able to articulate that too.
What I'll say to that is they're all kind of interdependent on one another. You have to have all three in order to really be, according to her model, someone who is, more self-aware about who you are, how you're wired, how you're programmed. The better we are for ourselves in advocating for ourselves, but the better we can be in terms of understanding others.
It's interesting, Madeline, because you're doing this coaching for Gen Zs and millennials to build that resilience and set those boundaries, but the companies and employers themselves haven't had to change. So it's like, no, we need a balanced relationship.
There's this book I love. It's called Everything Isn't Terrible, like Learning to Manage Your Anxiety. And it talks about, family systems and how they've developed to manage anxiety. I like it because it talks about, whatever your place within that family system is, how you bring that into the workplace, right? I think that's fascinating. But also workplaces are little dysfunctional organizations. So her point is when you start to change, the system will always, resist that change because they're like, this is how we function. You're like messing it up, right? And so sort of to your point, like if younger people are asking for things differently, that might actually be things we all wish we could have asked for. The system is, automatically going to be like, you are challenging the system and you're the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Kelly and I love the word homeostasis because the system wants it to keep operating the way it's operating. Families do it all the time. That's why you'll hear that, oh, it's the black sheep of the family.
They challenge the system. That's right.
Exactly. That's why change agents get really burned out sometimes at organization.
I mean, it is an exhausting role because you're constantly in some form of kind of conflict, right? It's thankless work a lot of the time.
Yes. Kelly and I feel very seen and heard right now, Madeline. Thankless work by HR change people. I don't know about you, Kelly, but now it becomes a therapy session and coaching session with Madeline, which is not our podcast.
One thing I do want to say kind of as the flip side to that, and, I think in support of the organization, because I do think there's always two sides to every story. A lot of the data is showing that companies are frustrated or say that they're frustrated with Gen Z's lack of, work readiness or lack of professionalism or professional skills. And to that I say, yeah, that's probably true. But then it's like, okay, what's the solution? Because if you think about how they've entered the workforce, they possibly have had their entire end of schooling and work introduction all online. They're on their phones, they're technology generation. Like, how are we teaching them the interpersonal skills they need to develop professional skills? Like, how? Because I do think we are at risk of alienating ourselves from the generations at work because it's a lot easier when we're not all in the same place. Like, I managed a lot of the anxiety around my relationship with my boss by having him in the office next door. And if I felt bad, just sort of like idling in the doorway so I could like get some positive reinforcement or just be like, did I do good? If you don't have that, like how? Like, there's this sort of constant thread of conflict that nobody's able to mitigate because we're not all together.
What are some of the things you're seeing with your Gen Z and millennial clients that they're coming to you with?
A lot of it is around lack of recognition. Yeah, so feeling like no one's invested in my career. I don't get learning and development opportunities. I don't get time with like my boss or my manager. There's a lot of feeling that there's not great leadership being modeled. And that's not engendering loyalty. And obviously, if you don't have loyalty, you don't have engaged staff, they're not productive, they leave. But I think that by not taking the time to invest, show an interest, ask younger employees like what they want from their future, what their goals are, we are at risk of alienating them further. And so that's a very common theme. Yeah. It's not even money. There was something I talked about recently. It was like the first or second thing they all said they wanted most from their managers was empathy.
Well, you said the word that Kelly and I consistently say. Sometimes we're fancy and say empathy. Sometimes we say it's a 4-letter word and it's care, right? They want you to know that they care. So Kelly and I we've been talking about caring and empathy for a really long time because I think, yes, that generation's demanding it and they're articulating it, but even boomers want to know the manager cares.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the influence part. Everybody wants to know I'm doing a good job. And we so easily say, well, millennials need it because they just got trophies for everything and Gen Z want it because they're demanding. But it's like, it's a human need. If these are the things that Gen Z and or millennials are saying they want, can we pause and look at what they actually are and ask if that's so different as to what any individual would want from work? Because it's very easy to say they're demanding, they're needy, they're this, but if you really look at the core of what they want, they're basic human needs that we all want.
It's fascinating because you talked about the intergenerational piece, which I think it's where you hear the comments about they're entitled, they're privileged, they don't work hard enough. So you hear all of that. But I'm curious, what should a workforce do? What should a company do to make sure that everyone feels, heard and listened to and supported?
I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? Right? Like, what can we do? Because it's obviously going to take up time and labor in ways that we sometimes just don't feel we have the capacity for, particularly if we are in a busy workplace. So let me sort of flip it for a moment. I was coaching one of my clients yesterday and he was ex-Google who had gone to a startup, and he's one of those sort of maybe a little bit of an anomaly. Like, he's got the very sort of software engineering brain, but very people-oriented and very good and very interested in managing. And so he's sort of entered this company where it's very young, it's startup. They seem great, but he's like, they need me a lot. My staff need me. And he said, I want to give to them. Like, he's one of those people that wants to, but he said, how am I going to be able to scale me? right? Like so that they all can feel like seen and wanted and heard. And we had to sort of strategize around it because I said, you will get burnt out yourself if you're providing continual pastoral care to every single person in your team and managing the work, right? Like managing people is sort of what we end up having to do on top of doing the work. So it's a big question. I said, look at the team you have and identify who has management potential, right? And invest in those people a lot. There was something I read recently about great leaders work out or observe who the strong people are, and then they really invest in them. That doesn't mean they ignore other people, but they really invest in the people that they can then bring up to spread some of this work out to, right? The other thing I said, and I say this all the time, I'm a big advocate of it, is get younger employees into group coaching. It seems strange for employers to invest like L&D budgets or whatever it might be into younger employees because like, oh, they're just going to leave anyway, or what's the point? I'm like, no, make them think like leaders now. First of all, you connect everybody, they feel invested in because you're taking time to like, provide opportunities, which is one of the things they want. They can learn the skills, some of the things that you say they lack, right? They can learn what it is to be a good leader and start taking some of that personal responsibility. So then they start interacting with people that way. So you are actually developing leaders and managers earlier on, right? And it does sort of take off some of the load from the top, but it's also like effective because they can share experiences. So they're the sort of two things we talked about yesterday with my client. And that's sort of what I would say as a solution.
It's interesting because I'm just thinking through people that, being someone who's gone through kind of the generational workforce and being looked at and labeled and things like that. It's the simple things too that a lot of younger generations aren't familiar with yet. And it's everybody is in their different space and a different time. And they're all very individual, and you have to look at each person as an individual. So I love the group coaching concept because it does allow for there to be a lot of knowledge sharing. So what kinds of results are you seeing as a result of the group coaching?
Well, I think one of the things it really does well, it does what I would call like norm setting. So it sort of can teach these younger people how you do that. How do you ask for feedback? What is the organizational culture around this, or just the workplace culture around how you do these things? So it can actually change behaviors, and it does increase what people say, we call professionalism, because it sort of tells them, oh, no, you can do that, or no, you should do it this way. Like all of these things that we assume people know and they don't know, and sort of give permission for certain things, or, set expectations around how things are done. So I think the results are that people feel less alone, less alienated, and more confident in, managing themselves at work, which is what, then managers say they want them to do. I think the biggest thing is that it really improves younger people's communication skills. I mean, that's huge, right? And that can affect everything from the micro, like asking for time off, to the macro, like professionally writing an email or whatever. So that's the biggest outcome. I think communication skills, and also just bringing people together to feel part of a shared experience.
I think it also, as you're talking it through, it creates like a safe environment for them to ask these questions that they would otherwise feel judged for, or I feel stupid asking this question. I should probably know this. I mean, I still am guilty of doing that. And I can't imagine what someone who's just graduated school, it's their first professional job. They've gone through maybe a one-day onboarding, if that. And now it's good luck, best of luck to you, go kill it. So the fact that you offer this really safe, inclusive, belonging environment for people to really ask and share is, I think, yet another beautiful aspect of what you do.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I think it was the driving factor that made me get into this work. Like, I want people to feel like they belong more. Like, I didn't feel like I belonged. And honestly, there's not a lot of ticks against my name. I am, English native speaker. I am white. I am middle class. I have all these things that you wouldn't think I wouldn't feel like I belong, and I didn't. And if I didn't feel like I belonged, imagine how other people feel.
I received some emails from a 17-year-old. It's an intern, and she's starting a new job, and she's the intern. And her emails to me were like texting, right? So it was like all lowercase, right? And I thought, oh my God, that's like my son, who sends, instead of saying probably, he writes Prolly, Prolly. And like, I'm not saying you can't say probably in an email, but you got to know who you're talking to as well.
I just had a conversation with if I send an email, could you please just reply to it? Say, done. Don't even have to you don't have to write something very long, just done. That makes me feel so much better.
Exactly.
Feels like you've seen me, heard me, and the thing is finished. Like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. I'm like, I came back to my desk. I'm like, are you serious? You never thought to just email me back and say you did it? But then I'm like, no one tells them.
How would they know? What made you very successful in high school or college isn't going to necessarily make you successful at work. The rules are so different. And so I love that she's figuring out how to help that generation, because it will just get more, like she said, more of a schism between the groups. I love that she's helping out. She's probably helping. I can't even say it. She's probably helping.
No, that doesn't even.
Probably.
Yeah,
She's
probably. Our last question, Madeline. So you have 1 minute with someone who is stuck. They want to break out. What is it that you tell them?
Oh, okay. I'm going to nuance the question. I can tell them or I can ask them. So if I'm just going to tell them one thing, I'm just going to do that whole, like, believe me, you can do it, because so many people before have done it and that are less experienced than you. But I think really I'm probably going to ask them something, and I'm going to ask them what gets them out of bed in the morning. Like, when do they feel most of service? What is it that they really, like, lights them up? And that would be my starting point for anything.
Thank you for breaking out and completely shifting the question to another question, which is what could coaches do, right? As they say, well, what are you looking for? What would you like to? Yeah, so that's beautiful.
Such a legal answer. Like, well, I'm going to take
it was a very good legal. Right. It was a good legal answer. Yeah. Thank you, Madeline. This is so lovely.
Thank you very much.
That was Madeline Miller, Gen Z career whisperer, and this is The Breakout.
Kelly and I are in the business of breaking free, being brave, and living boldly. We're here to inspire you to be the badass you are meant to be. Coaching and consulting is kind of our thing, and we're really good at it. Connect with us at abrachigroup.com.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Breakout so you never miss a new episode. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And please leave us a review. Reviews help more people find the show, connect with us, and live a more authentic life. I'm Kelly Gunther.
And I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich. See you next time.